Hi there, Miss Vidali here, and I'm going to talk to you today about Chapter 9 of To Kill a Mockingbird. It's a little more exciting, and we really get into the meat of the story. The climax is beginning, and so we get to see the major case and the racism that is going on at this time period. And so the beginning of the chapter is Scout, and she's about to get in a fight with Cecil Jacobs in the schoolyard, and then she remembers Atticus telling her to stop fighting, and there is no reason that warrants a fight. And so she asks Atticus, or she remembers asking Atticus, if he defends N-words. And so Atticus says, yes, of course I do. And then he tells her not to say the N-word. And she said, why not? It's a common word. And he says, you're not common. You're better than common. And so then she changes her tone and she says, do all lawyers defend Negroes? And he says, of course they do, Scout. And then she goes, why did Cecil Jacobs say that you defended N-words? He made it sound like you were doing something bad. And of course, Atticus goes on and explains that he is defending Tom Robinson. He is a man who lives in a little settlement, and he is a member of Calpurnia's church, and he is a good family guy. He's a really nice person, and Cal knows him really well. And so some people are going to talk around town and say that he shouldn't defend this man. It's a very controversial case, and it won't come to trial until the summer session. And the judge was kind enough to give him, Atticus, this appointment. And then Scout takes that all in, and she says, if you shouldn't be defending him, then why are you doing it? And why are you taking this case, basically? And he said, there are a lot of reasons, Scout. For one, I couldn't hold my head up. I couldn't tell you or Jim how to behave and what to do if I didn't do it myself. So he's basically talking about how he has to model what he wants for his children and for everyone in the town. He wouldn't be able to live with himself if he didn't try to help this man. And so then Scout goes to ask if they're going to win the case, and he says, no, honey, we're not going to win. And then he goes on to say, just because we're not going to win doesn't mean that we shouldn't try, right? The effort is worth all of the time and effort spent, I guess. So the next day, she goes and faces Cecil Jacobs in the schoolyard, and she says, asks him if he's going to take back what he said. And of course, he says no. He says that my parents say your dad is a disgrace and that Tom Robinson should be hanged, basically, but while using the N-word. And so Scout is furious. She's so mad, and he keeps yelling, Scout is a coward, and it's ringing in her ears, and it's being on repeat in her head. And so she just has to walk away because she knows that she would let Atticus down if she gave into it and started fighting. And so that day was over, and then disaster continued to happen at Christmas, even though Christmas is a good time and they get to see Uncle Jack. Uncle Jack is their uncle and Atticus's youngest brother, and they have fond memories of him. He's a doctor, and he has a cat, and he's like this cool guy who brings them presents and stuff like that. So they're excited to go pick him up and hang out with him. And so they go to Finch's Landing, which is where their sister, which is Scout and Jim's Aunt Alexandra, lives. And they take care of their grandson named Francis. And Francis is about Scout and Jim's age, kind of in between, and they don't really get along so well, right? He's kind of a brat, and he's not very nice, and he has Aunt Alexandra wrapped around his finger, and so he pretends that he's a good kid, but he's really kind of a little jerk. But anyway, they get to Finch's Landing, and they're there for Christmas, and Scout is trying to make nice small talk with her cousin Frances, and she goes, what'd you get for Christmas? And she tells him that she got a gun, that Atticus got them, and he says that he got like a bow tie and some shirts and knee pants and some socks, and Scout is unimpressed, but she pretends, and she says that's nice. And then she has to sit at the little table all by herself. She's the youngest, but Frances and Jim get to sit at the adult table, and she's left to sit at the small kid or baby table by herself, and she feels really left out. She wonders why her Aunt Alexandra is making her do that and why Atticus won't say anything. But Atticus won't say anything because they're at her house and it's her rules. And so eventually they go outside, and Atticus tells them to get out of the house and put on their coat. And then she's talking to Frances outside, and Frances is talking about, oh, the food was so good. Grandma's a good cook, which is the Aunt Alexandra. And she goes, he says that he wants to learn how to cook. And she said, boys don't cook. So here's some more sexist gender roles that are popping up in this time period that are filtered throughout the entire book. It's a big theme that continues to come up, and she acknowledges this a lot. And Frances says that Grandma, which is the Aunt Alexandra, says that all men should learn how to cook. And so then Scout comes back with, well, I don't want Dill cooking for me. I want to wait on him. And then she basically goes on to say, don't say anything, but Dill and I are going to get married someday. Obviously, she's got a big crush on Dill, and that's going to be her future husband. And then Frances says, well, what's the matter with him? And she goes, ain't nothing the matter with him. She gets a little offended, and he goes on to say, well, he doesn't have a home and nobody wants him, and he gets tossed around every summer to his aunts because his parents don't want him and stuff like that. And so then she says, that's not true, you're lying. And Frances says that she's really dumb sometimes, and that it's not really her fault though, because Scout doesn't know any better. And she says, what are you talking about? And then he goes on to repeat something that Aunt Alexandra said about Atticus, how he lets the kids just run around, do their own thing, and he defends inwards, and it's a disgrace to the family and stuff like that. And so she gets angry and she starts cursing at him, and she says, what the hell do you mean? And the next thing you know, Scout's kind of getting in trouble. And then Frances quietly, without anyone noticing, says that Atticus is an inward lover, and Scout says he is not, and they're fighting and they're going back and forth. And so she's chasing him, trying to, pretty much fight him, just like she was with Cecil in the schoolyard. And he says, Atticus is, and she keeps chanting that Atticus is an inward lover. And so then Aunt Alexandra comes around and they say, is everything going okay? Are you guys behaving? And she says, everything's fine, nothing to speak of. And the next thing you know, they settled down, and Scout is waiting for Frances to come back out again. And he finally does, and he just chants quietly, inward lover. And then this time Scout takes her fist and she splits it right into his face, and then she punches him again with her other hand, and Uncle Jack picks her up and pins her down, and she's in trouble. He gives her a spanking and sends her to a bedroom upstairs, and he comes to knock on the door, Uncle Jack does, and she says, go away. And she tells him that he's not fair. And so he asks her why he's not fair. And Scout basically teaches him a lesson that, you didn't ask for Scout's side of things. You only listened to Frances. And she goes on to tell him what Frances did and what he said. And he's on her side, and he feels really bad about it, right? He's actually kind of shocked. And then he says, well, I'm going to go tell Aunt Alexandra, and we're going to get to the bottom of this. And she says, no, sir, please don't. I don't want to let Atticus down. I would much rather him think that I was just fighting than to tell him what was said about him. She wants to protect her dad's feelings. And so she asks him nicely to bandage her hand, and he says he's happy to do so. And then later on in the evening, Uncle Jack and Atticus are sitting in the living room, and Scout walks in. They think that she's in bed, or at least she thinks that they think she's in bed. And they're having a conversation, and he says, I'm really sorry about spanking Scout this morning, or this afternoon. And Atticus says, don't worry, she's earned it. It's not a big deal. Don't feel bad about it. She needed to learn a lesson. And he goes, no, she taught me a lesson. She taught me that, I need to look at both sides, and that I shouldn't make an assumption, and that when kids ask something that's important, that you need to answer it. And so then he goes on and asks Atticus, his brother, how bad it's going to be for him with the trial. And he says, it couldn't be worse. It's going to be terrible. My kids are going to hear some awful things. They're going to see some awful things, but it's just something that I have to get through. And I hope that my kids come to me, he says, instead of listen to what everyone says in the town. So this is just kind of a preface for all of, and some foreshadowing for the tough things that the kids and the family is going to have to endure when this trial starts, and that they're going to see. It's going to be pretty ugly.